So Andrew Tate's The Real World, previously known as Hustlers University, got hustled. They got hacked. 800,000 users have been affected. And Russian hackers are using Firefox and Windows 0 days to essentially have RCE or remote code execution on your browser. Let's talk about it. Today we're facing an unprecedented array of data breaches, hacking attempts, and surges in digital crime. Why is there such a widespread amount, and how little is noticed in our everyday lives? Malware, dark sites, brute forcing, zero-day script kiddies, and nation-state hackers are all on the rise. Learn more about the threats we face and gain a bit more knowledge than yesterday. Hey everyone, another episode of Exploit Brokers is coming to you now. Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you could please do me a favor because it helps the channel out immensely. If you could hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification icon if you're on YouTube. And if you're on a podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcast, please give a follow, subscribe, and give us a good rating on there. Help us spread the episodes and the show. And with that said, let's jump into it. Hey guys, so let's start off with the article by Malwarebytes Lab specifically. Hilariously insecure, Andrew Tate's The Real World breached, 800,000 users affected. Andrew Tate's online education platform, The Real World, formerly known as Hustlers University, has been hacked, and user data has been stolen. In case you're not aware who Andrew Tate is, he's a, let's call him internet personality, who promises young men, or men of all ages as far as I'm aware, that they too can have money, fame, women, blah, 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 blah. If you want to look him up, just look up his tweets or look up his YouTube or anything else. You'll see what I mean. And I'll leave it at that. Now, hacktivists flooded the primary chat room with emojis as proof that they had breached the site. After this, they shared approximately 794,000 usernames of, allegedly, the site's current and former members with the Daily Dot and journalism collective DDoS Secrets. Now, from what it seems, DDoS Secrets, I went to go check. I'll put their description in the link below. There's like a 14-15 gigabyte dump that you can go and download and look through. The stolen chat logs originated from the platform's 221 public and 395 private chat servers. Included in the data are 794,000 usernames for current and former members, and 324,382, I know, very specific, unique email addresses that appear to belong to users who were removed from the main database after they stopped paying their subscription. It is not clear if this set of email addresses came from a less secure environment or whether the hacktivists just stumbled over those first. A source close to the hacktivist says the platform's security is hilariously insecure. So kind of two things to break down here. I'll break down one from, if you're not aware of what a hacktivist is, it's essentially a hacker who is an activist. I know, unique, but that's what it is, right? You've seen those a lot with stuff like Anonymous back in, I think, the 2010s, and several other groups that have kind of come up and down over the years, where they're a group of people who either have a lot of hacking experience, sometimes they're not very skilled, closer to like a script kiddie, or sometimes just very vocal, and they use their skills to pretty much do hacks that advance an activist style agenda. Now, from the hilariously insecure and something that comes from a less secure environment, I don't know how this was set up, but generally, one thing I've seen as a software engineer is that a lot of environments will have the production, then they have something like staging, and then they have something like dev. Dev or development is where developers can push stuff out to. Staging is kind of like a almost production, but kind of test, make sure production is going to go smoothly, because last thing you want is your production environment to go under for prolonged periods of time. That costs money, it frustrates users and stuff like that. Now, what I'm not sure of is what they mean by a less secure environment. Something you see with a lot of bug bounty programs, I guess, if you will. If you go through stuff like domain enumeration and things like that, you can find VMs and other stuff that was set up for testing or for other stuff and were eventually just stopped used, but they weren't properly deprecated. They weren't properly brought offline, and certain assets are still up there. Or sometimes you just don't properly set up things like databases or NoSQL environments or stuff like that, and the default credentials are still there. So when they say hilariously insecure and the less secure environment, there could be a lot of things here at play. I haven't seen a more detailed thing, and I'm just kind of making educated guesses. based on what I've seen as a developer that happens on environments. But again, I don't know how sophisticated Andrew Tate's online education platform is, and I honestly don't want to give it too much credit either way. So an unpatched vulnerability meant that they could upload emojis, delete attachments, crash everyone's clients, and temporarily ban people. All of this must be painful for a platform that claims to teach all digital skills. So an unpatched vulnerability, specifically what it seems that they use to get in, is think an end day vulnerability. So if there is a version of, let's go with Microsoft Word or Microsoft Office. If there is an old unpatched version of Microsoft Office that is vulnerable to X or Y, or has a certain bug that crashes when you type the letter W, for example, then you ideally would want to get that patched. Something that a lot of IT environments and developers and just anyone who's ever worked with tech is aware, right? There's always updates that are coming out because every piece of software has essentially been written by somebody at some point, and thus bugs can exist, and honestly always do exist in one form or another. So if there's an unpatched vulnerability, that means that the bug or the vulnerability was discovered, there was a patch for it, but the admins never took the time to upgrade it or patch it, right? And you see that a lot. If you go to something like Shodan is this really cool search engine that lets you kind of search the internet for different things, and you can see devices or servers that have either like default credentials or things like that. I haven't messed with Shodan that much. I probably should. But one thing that I've seen the use case for it is you can find vulnerable servers. And vulnerable because a lot of vulnerabilities have some kind of signature that you can use to determine if they are vulnerable to it or not. And that's what I'm assuming happened here, right? Now, the article takes a dig at it, says that he claims to teach all digital skills. For those of you who are not aware, I'll save you the Googling. He claims to show you digital marketing, crypto, and like a bunch of other stuff. But beware anyone promising a get rich quick scheme, because you're probably the reason they're getting rich quick. Now, continuing on, highly controversial figure Andrew Tate has not responded to the breach yet. This could be because he is facing other problems. He's currently under house arrest in Romania, facing trial after being charged with something I'm not going to say because I want to keep the show family friendly, human trafficking, and forming an organized crime group to exploit women. And there's other words there. I'll let you Google that. He is also wanted in the UK to face allegations of a certain kind of assault, and he denies all the allegations. So that's kind of the gist of this article. That's the gist of Malware Labs. And the fact that, Malware Labs is saying that the hacktivist said that the security was hilariously insecure, I kind of find interesting. Ultimately, security is only as good as whoever's adminning or doing it. Whatever you think of Andrew Tate, whether you like him or you don't like him, his personal thing is not what I'm talking about here. It's specifically that his stuff got hacked, and now you have roughly 800,000 usernames and other data that's been dumped out. Personally, I will say that for a man who says he makes so much money, he should at least invest in some security. It's pretty obvious he didn't. But I will leave that for now, and we will move on to the other episode. So, an article by Bleeping Computer. Firefox and Windows 0 days exploited by Russian RomCom hackers. Russian-based RomCom cybercrime group chained 2 zero-day vulnerabilities in recent attacks, targeting Firefox and Tor browser users across Europe and North America. So, a zero-day vulnerability is a vulnerability that's not known, hasn't been patched, or can't be patched because the vendor's unaware of it. It is 0 day. So, the first flaw, CVE 2024-9680, is a use after free bug in Firefox's animation timeline feature that allows code execution in the web browser sandbox. So whenever you hear something have a sandbox is a mechanism that allows a program to run in kind of a quarantined off piece of memory, right? So you operate in this kind of predetermined space, and anything that happens in there, it's supposed to be harder to break out of that sandbox. There's even bugs that are specific to breaking out of sandboxes and other stuff like that. Now, Mozilla patched this vulnerability on October 9, 2024, one day after ESET reported it. Now, The second zero-day that's been used, because it's a chain, the second zero-day exploited in this campaign is a privilege escalation flaw, CVE 2024-49039, in the Windows Task Scheduler service, allowing attackers to execute code outside of the Firefox sandbox. Microsoft addressed this security vulnerability earlier this month on November 12th. So, the Windows Task Scheduler, for those of you who've ever taken any kind of computer science courses, and for those of you who haven't, I'll recap. A task is a piece of instruction that the computer has to do. The Windows Task Scheduler is one of Windows' mechanisms to kind of determine what task can get put up against CPU resources. So the Windows Task Scheduler is pretty much kind of like cron or anacron on the Linux operating systems or Unix-like operating systems, in the sense that it's something that lets you run a program, script, or some piece of code at a predefined time, right? So think about it like, I want something to run at 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. or something in that kind of sense. So when it does that, the operating system knows, hey, I have this job, this task, that has to essentially be run at a certain time of day. And that's the kind of mechanism that's being talked about when they say the Windows Task Scheduler. Now, RomCom abused going back to the article, RomCom abused two vulnerabilities as a zero-day chain exploit, which helped them gain remote code execution without requiring user interaction. Their targets only had to visit an attacker-controlled and maliciously crafted website that downloaded and executed the RomCom backdoor on their system. So, a zero-day. I've already kind of explained a zero-day is a bug that the vendor doesn't know about, thus zero. But the chain exploit part. A chain exploit, it's kind of what it sounds like, right? You're daisy chaining, or you're putting one after the other, 0 days to get a much more severe or powerful 0 day. You see this a lot with like mobile, right? There is the idea of a full chain with persistence. There's a bunch of buzzwords, right? But you have one that gets you into the system. You have one that lets you get out of the sandbox. You have something else that lets you escalate privileges. There's a bunch of things that you can chain together, which make it so you pretty much can do a lot of powerful things that one individual exploit might not be able to get you by itself. And then RomCom is just kind of the name of the threat actor, or the APT, the Advanced Persistent Threat Actor. Here, that's kind of behind the attack. Now, based on the name of one of the JavaScript exploits used in the attacks, main-tor.js, the threat actors also targeted Tor browser users, versions 12 and 13 according to ESET's analysis. The compromise chain is composed of a fake website that redirects the potential victims to the server hosting the exploit, and should the exploit succeed, shellcode is executed that downloads and executes the RomCom backdoor, said ESET researcher Damian Schaefer. While we don't know how the link to the fake website is distributed, however, if the page is reached using a vulnerable browser, a payload is dropped and executed on the victim's computer with no user interaction required. And this is where the level of sophistication and the geekiness cool factor kind of kicks in, right? A drive-by payload, which is kind of what's going on here, that requires no user interaction, means that you didn't click a link, you didn't do anything, you visited this website, and then this specific attack chain redirects, downloads stuff, and then pops a backdoor, and then redirects you to another website. So I'm pretty sure you've seen it where if you've ever been on a website that does like a bunch of refreshes, and you've kind of noticed there's like a weird thing going on with the browser where it's like you see the URL changing multiple times, that's where there's multiple redirects. Well, in one of those redirects, there's a download that happens, and that download then executes something which then pops a shell, and that shell is essentially what the remote, or shellcode is what the remote hacker can use to do stuff, right? And in this case, it's downloading and executing the RomCom backdoor, which will then give them more access. Now, once deployed on a victim's device, this malware enabled the attackers to run commands and deploy additional payloads, chaining together two zero-day vulnerabilities armed RomCom with an exploit that requires no user interaction. This level of sophistication shows the threat actors' will and means to obtain or develop stealthy capabilities, ESET added. And yeah, it is insane, because the amount of sophistication that takes to find two vulnerabilities, have them chained. A lot of things that are chained generally go on, let's call them gray markets for, exploit brokers. And I'm not talking about the podcast, but the actual brokers of exploits. Depending on the kind of severity, it's like in the millions. So this stuff is some high level sophistication. It's not something that you'd buy in a forum for 20 bucks. Now, the number of potential targets run from a single victim per country to as many as 250 according to ESET telemetry. And all that kind of wrapping up to say that they were able to try to hit as many people as possible from 1 up to 250 in a single country. And that's according to the telemetry that they got. Telemetry being any kind of data that you get around stuff that's happening. Now, this isn't the first time RomCom has exploited a zero-day in its attacks. In July 2023, its operators exploited a zero-day, CVE 2023-36884, in multiple Windows and Office products to attack organizations attending the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania. RomCom, also tracked as Storm 0978, Tropical Scorpius, or UNC 2596, has been linked to financially motivated campaigns and orchestrated ransomware and extortion attacks alongside credential theft, likely aimed at supporting intelligence operations. The threat group was also linked to the industrial spy ransomware operations, which has since switched to underground ransomware. According to ESET, RomCom is now also targeting organizations in Ukraine, Europe, and North America for espionage attacks across various industries, including government, defense, energy, pharmaceuticals, and insurance. A threat actor is generally an advanced persistent threat actor is backed by a government. In this case, they are trying to do stuff to create havoc, do ransomwares, steal any kind of financial assets to support the intelligence community, or anything that they can to advance what they're doing. And this is kind of what we're seeing, right? Even though we didn't talk about ransomware here, a lot of my episodes have been talking about ransomware, just kind of what I've ended up talking about. What we're seeing is that there is a huge suite of tools that hackers have, and an even bigger suite of tools that nation state or APT hackers have, because they have more funding, right? If you have a ransomware group that makes a couple mil, that's great. Maybe they might be able to buy 1 or 2 0 days, but a government with like a $200 million budget, what's a $2 million 0 day? If it's going to get them more money or more assets or more intelligence or whatever, depending on what they're trying to do. And this is where it kind of gets interesting and scary, right? Because to find these 2 0 days, or to obtain these 2 0 days and then to chain them and execute them and use it to do different things, it's just really cool and really scary and interesting. Hey guys, I want to thank you for tuning in. This has been Lauda with Exploit Brokers. As well, I'm going to be using my new handle, CypherSaval. So this has been Lauda, aka CypherSaval, with Exploit Brokers, and I will see you in the next one.